Okay, so I don't believe we're live yet. I think we're just or we're live at the time. So for the first time ever, hopefully this works. Just mute that for a second. Hello everyone, how's it going? Hopefully we are live now. I'm not sure if we are live or not yet. Let me just get my camera up. Hello, good morning, all that sort of nice stuff. This is the first time I've ever actually done we are live. This is the first time I've ever used the YouTube schedule a live event feature, so I wasn't sure if it actually worked properly or not. Why does my headphone sound so... Oh, there we go. Hey, it turns out my headphone was turned down, not to my microphone. Oh well, so I believe we're live now, so that's cool. Yeah, we're cool. So my name's Steve Smith. This is my YouTube channel. I need to give it a more catchy name. I should just rename my YouTube channel the Broke Britannia YouTube channel. I'm just rambling now. It's early in the morning. It's 11:30 a.m. and we are currently waiting for the House of Commons business to start up today, where we will now be getting the beautiful...
The proceeding will start shortly.
Right on cue. The proceeding will start shortly. So, as you can see on the screen above me, I need to stop saying that, by the way. As you can see, and is like one of my catchphrases. I seem to say it all the time, and it's driving myself insane. So, above me there, you can see a list. At the top of the list, it says, urgent question to the Secretary of State for Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Affairs if he will make a statement on the violence in Israel and Palestine. So obviously, this is a question from, I believe, Lib Dem's Layla Moran. She is asking the Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs, aka Dominic Raab, if he will make a statement on the recent... the massive uptick in violence between Israel and Palestine. Obviously, more from Israel than from Palestine. So, I was actually expecting Prime Minister's questions today, so I had a list of stuff. On the list was this. So, I'm actually quite glad that there is a Parliament sitting today where they're going to be talking about this. I think it's really important, you know. So, I'll get that list off my screen a second. So yeah, for those that don't really know what's been happening and why this question is being asked overnight, well, I mean, this has been going on for decades, you know. 1 second, I'll just turn that light down a little bit. So yeah, this has been going on for decades. The troubles basically between Israel and Palestine. Israel continually try and take Palestinian land so they can settle their own people on it, and Palestinians obviously get angry about that. Very rightfully angry about that. If I was Palestinian, I'd be angry. I'm Scottish and I get angry about it, you know? So anyway, I digress. We all know that there's these age-old disagreements between the two sides. Now, why is this stream not on yet? This is supposed to be half 10. Anyway, so in recent days, there was a Muslim festival. I know nothing about religion. I don't attempt to know anything about religion. I just know about situations that happen, you know. So a few days ago, there was a religious celebration going on, and Israel sent their heavies in to basically harass them all. This obviously inflamed things because people were getting attacked at mosques, so they started attacking back, and now Israel are attacking blocks of flats.
Order.
And we're going to hear this question.
Today we are marking the 80th anniversary of the destruction of the House of Commons chamber by the Luftwaffe during what was the biggest air raid on London of the Second World War. This morning, the Lord Speaker and I laid wreaths at the memorial in Westminster Hall in memory of the 3 members of staff who lost their lives that night.
Okay, so we're just getting things.
On the way into the chamber today, my procession paused at the entrance arch to commemorate the raid. Colleagues will know that Winston Churchill ordered that the arch be retained in its bomb-damaged state as an enduring reminder of the ordeal Westminster suffered during the war.
If I knew that we were going to be talking about World War II and Winston Churchill, I would have probably just waited. Man, I don't know what it is today. I'm getting mad OCD about this. I know it sounds stupid that I was ready for Prime Minister's questions, and I mean, this is really not that different to Prime Minister's questions, but all the same, I was ready for a different event. I'm actually surprised Prime Minister's questions not happened. I thought being the first Wednesday of the new political term, they would be dying to get into questions, but apparently not.
At 5 p.m. on Tuesday,
What's he talking
the 18th
about?
of May. Nomination forms are available from the vote office on the internet.
Nominating what? I don't know. By the way, I look so pale today. You wouldn't think that I've been using bronzer. I've been trying to make myself look tanned, and no matter how much I do it, it's not working. I don't understand why why my bronzeness is not showing. I just look pale. I just look like Scottish, you know, as pale as it can be. As pale as the sky. We'll just do a little bit of wobbly wobble. By the way, you might not be able to see that. There it is. That is cool as hell. I worked out how to make my light just randomly change colours. I like it. Order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that Mr. Speaker do issue his warrant to the Clerk of the Crown
Someone's got their phone turned on.
Member to serve in this present Parliament for the county constituency of Chesham and Amersham in the room of Dame Cheryl Elise Kendall Gillan.
I've no idea what this is about. Order.
The question is that I do issue my warrant to the Clerk of the Crown.
What is going on here? What is going on?
Electing of a member to serve.
This
in
is the
present
12th, isn't it?
Parliament
Yeah.
For the county constituency of Chesham and Amersham in the room of Dame Cheryl Elsie Kendall.
Do it again. That was a really nice sound. Hey, let's do that again.
As many are of that opinion, say aye. I think the ayes have it.
The eyes have it. Sorry, ears.
We now.
My hand actually looks
the
more
urgent
tanned than my
question.
face. Here we go.
I
Urgent
call Layla
question.
Moran to ask the urgent question.
Let's see what she's got
Moran.
to say.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To ask the Secretary of State of Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Affairs if he will make a statement on the violence in Israel and Palestine.
A very, very simple question.
Mr. Speaker,
Who's this that's
the
answering
recent
the questions?
escalation in violence in Israel and the occupied Palestinian
Oh,
territories
it's James Cleverly.
is deeply concerning. It is the worst violence seen there for several years. As the Prime Minister
Since
and the Foreign
2014,
Secretary have
worst
made clear,
violence since then.
This cycle of violence must stop, and every effort must be made to avoid the loss of life, especially that of children. The UK offers our deepest condolences to the families of those civilians killed. Civilian deaths, both in Israel and Gaza, are a tragedy. We urge all sides to refrain from any kind of provocation so that calm is restored as quickly as possible. As we enter the final days of the holy month of Ramadan,
It is
restoration of peace and
Ramadan then. I did
security
think
is
that was
in
the case.
everyone's interest. The UK will continue to support that goal. The UK unequivocally condemns the firing of rockets at Jerusalem and other locations in Israel. We strongly condemn these acts of terrorism from Hamas and other terrorist groups, who must permanently end their incitement and rocket fire against Israel.
What the hell? This just shows you the problem we face at the moment. Like, no, there's no mention about Israel blowing up a block of flats and killing 30 people, you know? Like,
There is no justification for any targeting of civilians.
Even though that's what Israel are
has a
doing.
legitimate right to self-defense and to defend the citizens from attack.
This is
In
so
doing
bullshit.
So, it is vital that all actions are proportionate, in line with international humanitarian law,
And they're not.
and make every effort to avoid civilian casualties. Violence against peaceful worshippers of any faith is unacceptable.
Exact.
The UK has been clear that the attacks on worshippers must stop. The status quo in Jerusalem is important
So attacks
at
on-
all times, but especially so during religious festivals.
So attacks on religious worshippers must stop. But it was Israel that started this, you know.
Such as Ramadan. Our priority now must be an immediate de-escalation on all sides.
This statement
and
is
an
actually
end
all over
to
the shop.
civilian deaths. As I made clear over the weekend,
You've not
we
made
are
anything
concerned
clear,
about
James.
tensions in Jerusalem linked to threatened evictions of Palestinian families from their homes in Sheikh Jarrah. That threat is allayed for now, but we urge Israel to cease such actions, which in most cases are contrary to international humanitarian law. The UK continues to support
I love how they're talking about international law, then they
Context,
clearly
the
say that
Foreign
Israel
Secretary
broke
delivered
international
a
law.
message
You know
of
what I mean?
de-escalation in a call to the Israeli Foreign Minister yesterday, and will speak to the Palestinian Prime Minister shortly. I have spoken to the Israeli ambassador and the Palestinian head of mission in the UK to urge them to de-escalate and to restore calm. The UK is also engaged at the UN Security Council, calling for all sides to make measures to reduce further violence and making clear our deep concern at the violence at the holy sites in Jerusalem. I am
Again,
sure the
pinging
Security
back,
Council
he
will
keeps
continue
this
to
statement
monitor
is just
the
ridiculous.
situation closely and is due to reconvene. UK embassies throughout the Middle East are engaging with regional partners.
Like if this
and
was
we remain in
any
close
other,
contact with the US administration
like if this was
on
Russia
the
or Iran or Turkey, they would be
situation
sending
on
the
ground
planes
over
in,
the
you know.
last few days demonstrates the
Disgusting.
urgent need to make progress towards peace. The UK remains committed to a two-state solution.
No, you
as the
don't.
best way
If you were committed to a
bring peace
two-state
and
solution, this would have been
stability to the
dealt with
region.
10
I
years
repeat
ago.
Again, we urge all sides to show maximum restraint and refrain from taking actions which endanger civilians and make a sustainable peace more difficult.
I call Layla Moran.
So before Layla Moran gives her reply to that, I just think that was one of the most ridiculous speeches I have heard, and it was a completely ridiculous and just redundant answer to the question here. The statement just constantly pinged back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. For instance, they talked about Israelis defending themselves. Then they talk about people being attacked at religious sites. Now, the people being attacked at religious sites were not the Israelis, they were the Palestinians. They then talk about people trying to they then call Hamas terrorists. Like, they're not terrorists. Like, they're literally trying to defend themselves. And then he talks about the Israelis, he talks about people putting, civilians at risk. Yesterday, the IDF sent out a tweet threatening Palestinians that they were going to destroy their tower blocks. Literally says in the message they want to strike terror into people's hearts. That is terrorism. The IDF are the ones that are acting like terrorists here. Yet the world stage, because we sell weapons to Israel and we sell other stuff to Israel and they sell stuff back to us, it's like dealing with Saudi Arabia, and no matter what they do, they just get away with it. So let's see what Moran's got to say.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ibrahim Al-Masri, 11. Marwan Al-Masri, 6.
She's doing that thing where she reads all the names out. I mean,
10.
it was powerful the first time, but I think this is a bit silly. She could make a much better argument.
These are some of the names of the children killed this week, and last night an Israeli child was added to their numbers.
Mm-hmm.
My heart
It's
breaks.
just ridiculous. There's no need for people to
Mr.
die like
Speaker,
this.
my heart bleeds for Palestine, for Jerusalem, the city of my family, for the worshippers attacked by extremists at the Al-Aqsa Mosque on the holiest night of Ramadan, and for all innocent civilians, Israeli and Palestinian. We cannot allow this to escalate any further. The Israeli government, pursuing evictions in Sheikh Jarrah that would be illegal under international humanitarian law, including...
No, they are illegal under humanitarian law, not would. They are.
...of the Israeli authorities that injured hundreds has ignited a tinderbox. And Hamas then retaliated, and those strikes must be condemned too, because violence only begets more violence.
I mean, she is actually totally right on
the
that.
UN
Violence.
Special Envoy last night
There's no need
warns
for it.
that the situation is escalating towards a full-scale
I mean,
war.
it does look like we're
The minister
heading.
will know that he does not say such words lightly.
Yeah, I would say that what she's saying there is absolutely true. People, there shouldn't be any deaths on either side. There shouldn't be any violence on either side. But this is where we're at. This is what happens when one country tries to occupy another and take their land. People are going to fight back. But yeah, she's absolutely right with what she said there. I had another point and I've kind of forgot.
Not just to Israel, Palestine, but indeed the entire region. So my questions to the Minister are these. Will the UK back Security Council resolutions condemning these attacks, regardless of what the US does?
No, they won't.
And should that fail, will the Minister work with international partners like the European Union to issue a statement on de-escalation in the strongest possible terms today, now?
It is needed.
What steps is the UK taking?
Very rarely I
stop
agree with
attempted
Layla Moran, by
illegal
the way.
Evictions in Sheikh Jarrah? And will the government commit to supporting a new round of peace negotiations and indeed new elections in Palestine? And finally, if
I don't see what elections in Palestine are going to do.
recognize the state of Palestine, then when is? Mr. Speaker, the United Kingdom has a historic responsibility to the people of Palestine.
We really
and a
do.
fundamental obligation to uphold international law. That two-state solution, as promised to the likes of my family, is as elusive as ever. It is time for the government to not just say, but do.
She's absolutely right there. I mean, if our government cared about what was happening there, if they actually cared about the Palestinian people or stopping the war between the two, because where it's heading now, it does look like, as she says, it's heading towards a full-on war, which will be a third. It will be a third Gaza war. The last one was just horrific. I remember sitting watching it online on a press TV stream, and it was maybe the one before that. It was maybe the first one I'm thinking about, and the first one, where we were watching people getting white phosphorus bombed into their houses and stuff like that. It's just not needed, and that's where it's heading towards, and that sort of stuff is just really horrible. Britain's apparently one of these world powers. America has already basically said it's all Palestine's fault, which is pretty disgusting if you ask me. We're supposed to be better than that. You know what I mean? We're supposed to be a country that punishes people that do bad things and rewards people that do good things. We should not be trading with Israel now. We should have recognised Palestine as a state years ago. So much of the peace process that people talk about is hampered by the same people that seem to want the peace process. They then put things in place to stop the peace process, like this. Israel just do not seem to want peace. They do not want to come to the table. They do not want to come to they do not want a two-state solution. They just want to continue doing what they're doing, clearing people out of their lands, ethnically clearing people out of land, so they can put their own people in it and just steal their land and make Israel a little bit bigger. That's uncalled for. No, we would not tolerate that from any other country. I mean, could you imagine that, let's say Iran. Could you imagine it turned out that Iran was doing that to Syria? Iran was taking Syrian land. We would be all over that. It would be World War III. There's other places in the world, if they did that, it would be war instantly. Yeah, there's some people that get away with murder. Russia get away with murder in Crimea. They can just take whatever they want. Israel get away with murder because they can take what they want. It's like there are a few countries out there that have clicked on that if you are belligerent, then you can do what you want. And that's just how Israel acts. They're belligerent towards any sort of reason from the rest of the world. Much like Russia, they're just belligerent and they're just reject any sort of reason from the rest of the world, you know? So let's see what Cleverly's got to say in reply.
Mr. Speaker, I recognise the passion with which the Honourable Lady
what does that mean? Recognise the passion?
To both Jerusalem and the region. I can assure her that the United Kingdom will work with international partners, both bilaterally and through multilateral institutions, to encourage an end to the...
So this answer is completely guff. The fact that he's struggling to find words like it and the tells us that he's just making this up on the fly. There is no plan. Britain is not going to do anything. He is talking crap.
Nobody any good. We all mourn. We all feel the deepest sympathy and condolences for those who
I
have,
genuinely
lost
don't think he
children
does. If he
and
did,
loved
he would
ones,
do something
whether
more.
they be in Gaza or in Israel. And it is in everybody's interests to de-escalate. And
That
we
is
work
true.
With our,
Her mask's a bit big.
regional
What the?
partners,
Oh, she's only got
say,
one
as
side
well
on. Okay.
as, the leadership of the Palestinian Authority and Israel to work towards de-escalation. The rocket attacks coming from Gaza cannot be justified.
Hello, anyone
and we
watching
call
this
upon
today,
them
by the
to
way. I don't have
cease
the chat open, so I've got
immediately
no idea
as
what's
part of
happening on the
this
stream or how it looks or anything like that. Well, hello. If you want to send us a message, I'm on the
Speaker,
Broke Britannia
over the
account just now,
past
so it's at
week,
Broke
Hamas
Britannia
is
on Twitter.
alleged to have fired over 1,000 rockets at indiscriminate targets inside Israel. By the same token,
Sorry, what?
Israeli aggression has also escalated. Does my honourable friend
Sorry, what?
agree
Did he
that
say 1,000 rockets? Like, let's have a listen to that again.
Mr. Speaker, over the past week, Hamas is alleged to have fired
1,000 rockets. I don't know where he's got the 1,000 rockets claim. Yesterday there was one large wave of 130 at one go. I've read nowhere that there's been 1,000 rockets in the last few days. That is quite hyperbolic.
against international law.
And
abhorrent.
he mentioned the Israel bombing of the building as well, which is not cool.
We have spoken with both Israel and with the Palestinian Authority to work with them to de-escalate and bring about peace. He mentions the avoidance of civilian casualties. We press for that as a priority in all instances, and we will continue to work both with.
That's the problem with this conflict. None of the sides seem to care about civilian casualties, because both sides of this are just so.
Perhaps closely.
They've just been in this so long that they don't care. They just see it as.
So that we don't have to.
It's just, hey, we won one. We won. It's all just.
In either Gaza.
I think it's all just lost the plot.
Let's go
quite
to
frankly.
Shadow Minister Wayne David. Wayne.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr.
Like
Speaker.
everyone else in this House, I have been appalled by what we have seen in Jerusalem.
What is he
Gaza,
doing, man?
and
Guy, your
Israel.
camera's over here.
The loss
over
of
here.
life has been terrible.
He's
and
like-
my heart goes out to the families.
He's looking at his start
who've lost
button.
loved ones. The Labour Party strongly condemns the indiscriminate firing of over 1,000 rockets by Hamas. And I also strongly condemn Israeli actions that have killed Palestinian civilians.
He's just said exactly
Israel
the same
and
thing as the last
Palestinians
guy.
generally must do everything possible to de-escalate the situation. And I would urge the government to do all it can to prevent
I mean, he's just
further
literally
conflict.
asked the same
Violence
question.
must stop now. Once this terrible violence is ended, we must ensure that the root causes of the violence are recognised and addressed. The eviction of Palestinians from their homes in East Jerusalem must end. International law must be upheld.
Who remembers when Corbyn was getting called anti-Semitic for bringing this topic up?
At the same time, Britain
Crazy
and the
days, eh?
international
What the
community
hell?
must recognise the commitment to a two-state solution.
That guy's got a horrible
Will the
microphone.
government commit to doing this?
Mr. Speaker, the
What
honourable gentleman
overblown
highlights,
question.
a number of
He just
areas
asked the
where
same
UK
question, then
is long-standing, particularly
generic.
with regards to
There was no point
settlements,
for that.
Evictions, issues which I've discussed a number of times from.
The way I see it, unless you're going to ask a question about are Britain going to take action to punish Israel for attacking buildings, because we can't punish Palestine because we don't recognise them as a state. We can punish Israel, though. We could punish Israel and discourage them from bombing people. None of these people ask that. None of these people go into that sort of area of the topic. Why? Because they don't actually care. Oh, here we go, another Tory.
Speaker, the Minister will know how deeply shocked many of my constituents in Gloucester and across the land are by the extraordinary images this week during Ramadan of the Israeli Defence Force effectively attacking the Al-Aqsa Mosque, centre of Islamic worship in Jerusalem for hundreds of years. And although the rocket attacks by Hamas from Gaza are completely indefensible, it's clear that a major cause for the increased discontent is the number of illegal evictions from Sheikh Jarrah.
Yep.
So will my right honourable friend confirm today that the government will ask Israel to cease immediately
Finally,
any further
this
illegal
is the sort of
evictions
questions
in
we should be
Jerusalem
getting here.
and to respect the sanctity of
Absolutely
mosques?
great
Without both of
question
these
there
steps,
by
surely
Richard
an already
Graham.
fragile situation can only deteriorate.
Yeah, that was excellent questions. Exactly what
With
people should be
regard to
asking.
the holy sites,
That's exactly what people should be asking.
home of some of the holiest sites for all three Abrahamic religions. Our position is that the status quo must be maintained and those religious sites must be respected. Obviously, many people have been very distressed by the images that we've seen from the region. We will continue to speak directly with our.
That's just a nonsensical answer.
In the Israeli government about
what a pointless answer this is. He's just waffling. That is waffle.
Has been long-standing. And
this is like an episode of Yes Minister.
The dispatch box.
He's just saying no in 3,000 words.
Immediately cease its indiscriminate rocket
How?
attacks.
What are you going to do to make them do it?
And we call upon all actors in this to.
Do you know what I mean? It's like Hamas are not going to stop defending themselves unless you stop Israel from bombing them. The only people our government actually have control to punish, slow down, stop, or whatever is Israel. We cannot sanction Palestine because we don't recognise them as a state. We can only sanction Israel. Maybe our politicians should be working towards putting sanctions on Israel, sanction their trade, sanction travel, sanction all that sort of good stuff that we would sanction Russia or Iran or any other state we don't like. Sanction them. If we force them to stop bombing Palestinians, then guess what? Palestinians might stop attacking them back.
Bring about peace so that we don't see any more fatalities and casualties.
But they won't do that. That's what you just asked for.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd congratulate the honourable member for bringing this.
Sorry, this topic gets me riled up.
The SNP condemns all violence, whoever perpetrates it and whoever it is perpetrated against. We send our deepest condolences to the innocents who've been caught up in this dreadful, dreadful conflict. We're a friend of Palestine, we're a friend of Israel also, but above all else, we stand foursquare behind international law. And I suggest it's through that prism that we need to look at this latest flashover of a long simmering injustice.
Absolutely.
So I've got two particular points for the Minister, and I agree with much of the tone and sentiment of his statement. I think it's worth stressing the unity of this House in this situation. But surely now is the time to recognise Palestine.
Yes,
that would give an impetus
absolutely.
to the two-state solution. And settler goods, by their very definition, are illegal. The UK should not be trading in them. And if we won't ban them into our presence, can we not at least label them as such so that consumers can make a choice? Because we do have influence within the State of Israel, which is a deeply complex place. And the government is not, the Israeli government is not entirely in charge of events, but we do have influence.
Yeah,
warm words, however sincere, won't cut it, Mr. Speaker. Now's the time for action.
Alan Smith, bang on there, just a good Scotsman to get to the crux of the problem. We need to recognise Palestine. If we can, at the moment, like I was saying just before we listen to this clip, at the moment, the only country we can punish is Israel. You know what I mean? We can sanction Israel, we can sanction the trade, we can sanction settler trade. We can take actions against Israel on a geopolitical level. We can't do that against Palestine. We can't encourage Palestine to stop fighting back because we've got no geopolitical power over them. Israel don't let us have that. Now, if we recognise Palestine as a state and we all start trading with Palestine and everyone starts being cool and we start accepting them into the geopolitical world, then guess what? Then we can sanction Palestine. Great question there. Absolutely great question. Let's listen to the nonsensical answer we get from the Tories.
I thank the honourable gentleman for the comments he's made about the tone of this debate, and I agree with him on that. Our priority at the moment, I understand the points he makes about the timing of recognition and long-standing conversations about
just do it.
Goods coming
recognise
from,
them.
Israel. And whilst those
this would
issues
solve so
well
much of the
worthy
problems.
Debate, our priority at the moment is to bring about peace. We are focused relentlessly on that.
The Scottish guy's like, whatever.
The UK government,
like they want peace, but they're not trying to get peace.
To bring about a resolution to the current conflict. Other wider issues, I'm sure we'll have the opportunity to debate.
If they wanted peace, they would try and get peace. Stupid answer.
Speaker, many in Dudley South are shocked at the scenes from Al-Aqsa Mosque and a police response that does not appear to be proportionate. Does my honourable friend agree?
He's reading that off his hand.
A two-state solution requires both sides to feel secure,
like that.
And that means a stop to the stream of rocket attacks from Hamas, restraint from Israeli forces and the wider population, and a reconsideration of the evictions and settlements policy by the Israeli government and courts?
Good questions. Now, of course, much before we even get to the answers, there's only two things they can sort. The one thing they can't sort is the rockets, because again, like we said, we've got no geopolitical power over Palestine because we don't recognise them as a state.
The policing of of Jerusalem and the holy sites within Jerusalem are always a sensitive issue, particularly so during religious festivals like Ramadan. And we have, and we will continue to call for restraint in the policing of those areas. As I say, our position on settlements and evictions is long-standing, but ultimately I do agree with my honourable friend that a two-state solution is the best chance for a sustainable peace in the region, and that's what we'll continue to work towards.
Right, let's go to Lillian Greenwood. Lillian.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituents have watched with growing anxiety, anger and frankly horror at the spiralling events in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories. The threat of forcible evictions and demolitions, restrictions on Palestinians entering the city of Jerusalem and violence against worshippers at the Al-Aqsa Mosque have all inflamed tensions, and we now see a terrifying escalation with Hamas rocket attacks and Israeli airstrikes, both killing and injuring innocent Israeli and Palestinian civilians. Both are unacceptable and both must end. But does the Minister agree that if proper accountability and the rule of law had been followed in the past, we might not be where we are today?
Very good point here.
And what steps will he take now to ensure that the Israeli government adheres to international law,
Not about
ends
none.
the evictions,
Zero.
ends the discriminatory planning
Zero.
laws, and ends the construction of
I
illegal
love to
settlements?
anyone though.
Minister.
Should we stop the evictions?
Mr. Speaker, as I have said, the UK's position on settlements and evictions is long-standing. We've communicated that both from the dispatch box,
Long-standing, and we do nothing to stop it.
in the Israeli government. But ultimately, as I say, our priority at the moment is to do everything we can, both bilaterally and through the multilateral institutions, to bring about an end to this conflict. So the terrible images, the terrible and distressing images that she and others in this chamber have spoken about come to an end, and then we can work on a long-term, sustainable, peaceful solution for the region.
Let's go to Crispin Blunt.
Crispin Blunt, oh, this will be good.
If my right honourable friend examines his statements today and compares them to those made by the Foreign Office 25 years ago in respect of illegal settlements in our homeland,
brilliant.
he will find a remarkable similarity.
Crispin.
What has changed
I did not expect
is the
that.
end of any hope for the Oslo peace process,
Mm-hmm.
built out of existence by illegal settlements, and the dominance of factions in both communities of those least committed to justice, security and reconciliation between the Israeli and Palestinian peoples. When will the United Kingdom take real accountability for those breaching international and humanitarian law,
Exactly.
including those indiscriminately mortaring the innocent, the disproportionate response of the by the occupiers to violence by the occupied,
he's using really strong terms here, like
of the
occupiers.
violation of the Fourth Geneva Convention that has made a practical mockery of British policy commitment to a two-state solution.
Whoa, Crispin just knocked it out of the park with this one.
Mr.
Bang
Speaker,
on.
as I said, the
Bang on.
UK's position on settlements is long-standing.
James, you're out of your depth here, mate. You're out of your
elsewhere.
depth
There
now.
is no justification. There is no justification for the violence that we're seeing coming out of Gaza and the targeting of...
I mean, I think Cleverly should be... I think he should be answering the question of why what he's saying today just sounds exactly the same as what was said 25 years ago. You know what I mean? Why? Crispin Blunt just knocked out the park with that question. I don't think you could have got a better question here. It's like, this has been the same thing for nearly 30 years. Why is it still going on? Why are we not doing anything to stop it?
Civilians. As I said, Israel absolutely has the right to defend itself.
Then so does Palestine.
We call upon...
If Israel has a right to defend itself, then so does Palestine. Like, you cannot give one side the right to defend itself and the other not. That is is that racism? That's basically racism, is it? Or exceptionalism. If you've got one group, and you've got two groups, you've got one that are like the Team P, one Team I, and you're like, right, Team I can do what they want, but Team P, you're not allowed to defend yourself. If you defend yourself, we punish you. Team, they're just going to go, "Ugh," and they get away with it. It's not fair. It's ridiculous. It's just, I can't believe he's standing like, oh, they've got every right to defend themselves. Then so's Palestine. You can't say that without the other people being allowed to defend themselves too. And this is the problem. They're just not, they don't want to understand the situation, and they do not want to deal with it.
That defence, but ultimately what we are seeking to do is bring about a speedy conclusion to the current violence.
You're not doing anything, mate.
Seeing,
that's the fact.
And then we will
nothing is being done.
I appreciate you said that this has been a long-standing, it has been a long-standing aim of this and other governments.
As long as I can remembering about politics, I can remember. I can remember this is
a peaceful resolution to this region.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of the many constituents of Newport East who've been in touch with me over the last couple of days, expressing their horror at events and calling for an end to the violence, can I too join others here? Calling on the
I've got no idea who this is, by the way. Let's have a look.
Diplomacy of the foreign
I think she's Labour.
Office to try and bring an end to this.
Yeah, this is Jessica Morden, Newport, Labour.
Civilians cannot be the solution to the ongoing tragedy of this conflict.
I can assure the honourable lady that we will use our considerable diplomatic might to work both with the government in Israel and in the occupied Palestinian
yeah, so you will.
territories.
How can you?
The Palestinian Authority and with regional partners and through multilateral forum to bring about a speedy resolution to this.
He loves that word, speedy. They're not.
No good.
There's nothing happening here. What are they doing?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I draw the House's attention to my register of interests. My right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, said, "Our commitment to Israeli security is unwavering."
Wait, his register interest.
Of the 1,000 rockets that have been fired towards Israel, many of them have fallen short and caused damage and death in Gaza. So will the Minister confirm that we are doing everything possible to support our close ally against what amount to nothing more than terrorist groups?
Right, okay, wait, one second. Who is this guy? He said something about the register of interests there. So very, very quickly, let's have a look here. John Henley, register of interests. One moment. I know I'm doing this live on air. I don't know if you can actually see this. So register of interests. Register of interests. They work for you. Publications. John Howell. Let's see where his interests lie. Sponsorships. Just say sponsorships, Mr. and Mrs. Barnett. Okay. I'm interested that he said something about the interest rate registers there. Register of interests. Let's have a look. Who's he getting money from then? 2000 associate blah 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 blah. Communications company, Brampton, blah blah blah, Telford, blah blah blah. Strategic work. Does it say? There we go. Let's look at all the entries here. February 1, 2021, a private donor, 3,000, Bernard Taylor. Ah, here we go, as expected. Look at this. So, this is why this minister, what's his name again? John Howell. This is why John Howell, can you see that on screen there? This is why this minister just decided that he had to mention something on the register of interests there, which I thought was weird. As we can see here, one of his donors is the Conservative Friends of Israel. This is how propaganda works, people. This is how lobbying and propaganda works. This guy here gets money donated to him from a group called the Conservative Friends of Israel. For this donation, service, money, whatever you want to call it, he is expected to come to the House of Commons and defend Israel like this in the strongest terms, using lies, propaganda, spin, anything he can to spin Israel as the absolute good guys and the Palestinians as the absolute bad guys. This is how this sort of intergovernmental geopolitical propaganda works. And quite frankly, it is disgusting. If you want to see some more on this, look up Al Jazeera's documentary called The Lobby. There's people in English politics that have tried to discount this and call it propaganda, but the fact is, it happens, it's disgusting. Just blows my mind. I think it's hilarious that he's forced to mention this before he speaks.
Speaker, my
hilarious.
friend makes a good point that the rocket attacks by Hamas from Gaza do harm not only indirectly but directly.
And yeah, by the way, there is
a
Labour Friends of Israel as well.
Immediately,
they're in this group has got a version for every political party.
In doing so, we urge them to act with.
It's quite likely that your MP has received a free trip to Israel from a group like this because they operate over all the politics. It's crazy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The COVID-19 pandemic has hit Palestinian communities disproportionately hard, but despite Israel having the world's highest COVID-19 vaccination
this is
rate,
another topic
it remains
that I
the
could
case
rage
that
about.
under 150,000 Palestinians have been vaccinated in the occupied West Bank and
Disgusting.
Gaza. What are FCDO ministers and the representatives there doing to rectify that
Nothing.
injustice?
Yeah, if you don't know what this minister's just talked about, it is Deirdre Brock. Israel's got one of the world-leading vaccination programs, but they don't vaccinate Palestinian people. They only vaccinate the people in Israel.
Mr. Speaker, as I
No
said,
words.
our main priority at the moment is the cessation of the violence. That
Genuinely blows me away.
The Honourable Lady will know that the UK has been one of the most generous donors to the COVAX vaccination programme, which has helped communities across the globe have a route out of this pandemic through the vaccination process. We're incredibly proud of the £548 million that we have contributed to that, as well as our technical expertise, and that will be to the benefit.
You should
of
only be
Palestinian
proud
people,
of spending money if you get a result for it.
Let's go to Raymond Chiste.
Raymond.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Like all members of Parliament, I condemn all acts of violence and the loss of innocent lives.
No, where's this going?
The focus of my question to the Minister is with regards to freedom of religion or belief for all. Does the Minister agree with me that the force used against the worshippers at the Al-Aqsa Mosque on the 27th of Ramadan, the night of Laylatul Qadr, one of the most important nights in the Islamic calendar, was completely and utterly unacceptable? And in light of the United Kingdom's commitment to human rights and freedom of religion or of belief for all, I know the Minister has raised these matters with the Israeli authorities, but can you assure the House that you will continue to raise these with the Israeli authorities to ensure that all individuals can practice their faith freely and openly in the holy city of Jerusalem? And with that, can the Minister ensure that freedom of religion or belief and human rights is put on the G7 presidency agenda later this year?
Good question. Absolutely good question.
I thank my honourable friend, and I pay tribute to the work that he's done with the freedom of religion or belief. He is right that
Cleverly really is just waffling through pretty much every question here today. He's gave no answers or no commitments to anything yet.
That policing is particularly sensitive around the holy sites of the religions in Jerusalem, and particularly so during religious festivals like the holy month of Ramadan. We have made that position clear with the Israeli authorities.
Well, it's not made it clear enough, James.
Argument in our bilateral conversations with them.
Mr. Speaker, after years of persecution and oppression, indiscriminate attacks, a brutal siege of Gaza, the expansion of illegal settlements and demolition of Palestinian homes, unfair trials, arbitrary detention and restrictions on the freedom of movement, and now with the attack on worshippers at the Al-Aqsa Mosque, tensions in the region are now the highest.
Says Imran Hussein, by the way, from Bedford.
And I join
Bedford East.
others in condemning the escalation in violence and the loss of life. Mr. Speaker, yet the silence of the international community is deafening.
Yeah,
even as the Palestinians scream out for help. So I have to ask the Minister, how many times will we come back to this House to debate the persecution of the Palestinians, and when will the international community finally wake up?
Once a year for 25 years, apparently.
Mr. Speaker, I don't recognise at all the scenario that the honourable gentleman paints. This is an issue that I've spoken about. From
he
the
literally
back.
just
The Prime
said the
Minister has
same
made a
things as
statement
other
on this
people have
issue. The
said.
Foreign Secretary has made a statement on this
He has
issue.
not said
We
anything
are speaking
different
with
to what
the
anyone else
United
has said.
Nations Security Council.
What the hell?
United Nations regularly make statements on this issue.
Cleverly,
This is
you are a joke.
terrible
What the
situation,
hell?
No doubt. We are working to bring it to a conclusion, and we will continue to work.
What a prat.
Peaceful two-state solution. So the
See what annoys me about the answer he just gave to this question, right? We've had how many questions already? We've had 13 questions. No, we've had 12 questions before Imran Hussein that just spoke, right? Nothing Imran Hussein said has not been spoken about in any other question there. Yet for some reason, Imran Hussein from Bedford's the one that gets told he's wrong. Even though what he's just said pretty much agrees with everyone else. It's already spoke. Sorry. What's Imran Hussein of Bedford done wrong here? Like, what's he said so wrong? He's been totally, oh man, that annoys me.
Israelis and the
that answer just seemed like cleverly was telling him he's wrong because he's Labour.
I'm sure the goal of everyone in this House and in the wider international community.
Richard Holden. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's
Yeah,
clear
Richard
from voices
Holden.
across this House and internationally that everyone is incredibly disappointed to see that the violence has broken out in the region once again after the Palestinian Authority recently resumed cooperation with Israel. And does my right honourable friend agree that continuing down the path of normalisation, rather than that of violence and escalation, as we've seen recently, is the only way to secure
No.
And will the UK government continue to...
Normalisation is not the way to go. He's talking about normalising the situations in Israel and Palestine. That means making what's happening there now today and the situations that Palestinians and Israelis live in as normal. It's not normal. Like, what's happening in Israel between Israel, Palestine, IDF, Hamas, all involved, it is not normal and should never ever be normalised. That is ridiculous. It is an absolutely abhorrent thing to say. It's like, oh yeah, let's just normalise occupation and settle. What the hell?
Point. The UK government, both ministerial and official level, encourages.
So Richard Holden had the worst question of the day so far.
And the Israeli government. I have spoken
normalisation.
to
What
both
man?
yesterday. I'm sure I will have further such conversations in the future.
You normalise good things, not bad things.
Support the closer working between the Palestinian Authority and the government of Israel as part of our.
They don't work together.
Route towards a sustainable two-state solution.
Two-state solution, but we don't recognise one half.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Sorry, Andy, very quick. Like, they keep talking about the two-state solution. It's like, how can you have a two-state solution when you only recognise one of the states? Like, before we can remotely get anywhere near a two-state solution, we need to recognise both states. That means we need to recognise Palestinian and give them rights. We need to... This seems to be the answer. Like, I keep coming back to this, and it seems to be the easiest route to peace is to make Palestinian, for the world to recognise Palestine as a state, because then we can protect them as a state. They can be represented as a state. As it is just now, we can't. They're basically just a penned off group of people with no rights geopolitically. It's insane.
Foreign Secretary will take action on ethnic cleansing in Xinjiang. Why not in Sheikh Jarrah?
Exactly.
If the UK government will impose sanctions for the occupation of the Crimea, why does it allow trade?
This is exactly what I was talking about.
In the occupied Palestinian territory.
It's exactly what I was talking about. We would issue... No, I mean, we would punish Russia for this. We've punished Russia for Crimea. We've ejected their politicians. We've made it so they can't do certain trades and stuff like that. But we can't do this with Israel for some reason. It's just lunacy. It's ludicrous. We would do the same for any other country, but for some reason Israel we don't.
The Minister rightly condemns the killing of children in Gaza and Israel. Does he recognise that these war crimes spring from an unlawful occupation? And will he now give his full support to the investigation of the International Criminal Court?
Yes, great question. I feel bad for interrupting.
Speaker, I don't think it's at all helpful to try and imply that there is a commonality between the examples that he gave and the situation that we see in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories. He will
what does that even mean?
That where we have criticism of the Israeli government We have a strong enough relationship that we are able to air those criticisms, whether it be from the dispatch box here or in terms of our bilateral conversations. We will continue to work towards a sustainable,
Tell you what,
peaceful
you've not even tried.
Remains the UK government's goal.
Here we go. Here's Cleverly again. Cleverly again is mentioning the two-state solution, but at the same time he refuses to acknowledge Palestine as a state.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the last few days, I've been contacted by hundreds of
There's Anthony Higginbottom.
concerned by the
No relation to HBK.
Sheikh Jarrah, the
I hope.
activities outside the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the events we've seen in the last 36 hours. Could the Minister reassure them and me and the whole House that the government will use the full power of its diplomatic network to de-escalate the immediate issue and then bring both sides back to peace talks, because that's the only way that we can prevent events like this happening again?
This guy seems all right, but he seems quite
Mr.
new.
Speaker, the Al-Aqsa Mosque is one of the most holy sites in Islam.
I think he made a good question. That Anthony Higginbottom's first time I've actually seen him in the House of Commons. Made a very good question, but I mean, you can smell the new paint smell. You know what I mean? He's clearly one of the 2019 intake. He makes a good question, but sadly, this is a question that has been asked, as we were told earlier on in the session, once every 25 years. And every 25 years, another government minister, like James Cleverly, comes out and waffles a load of crap, avoiding the answer or any sort of responsibility.
And Jerusalem has the privilege of being the home of a number of the holiest sites in the Abrahamic religions. Therefore, the policing of Jerusalem needs at all times to be sensitive, as I say, particularly so during the holy month of Ramadan. I can assure him and others that the UK government will work tirelessly to bring about a conclusion to this, so that we know...
You know, like, I just had an idea. Why does, like, the UK government or American government or France or Germany, why don't we proposition that, like Jerusalem, the city of Jerusalem, there's so much different people there, of so much different beliefs, so much different ideologies and backgrounds and nationalities. Maybe, just maybe, it should be run by an independent body, you know? Maybe it's not best that the IDF protect Israel. Maybe the British Army or a division of the British police should be the people that oversee law and order in Jerusalem. Maybe NATO. Maybe we'd get a NATO police force that just looks after Jerusalem. I think one of the keys to de-escalate the thing would be to make Jerusalem neutral. You know what I mean? Although I know that people like Palestinians, they claim it's theirs. Israelis claim it's theirs. Others claim it's theirs. But I think it's maybe best that it's just everyone's and it's no one's, you know? Just make it neutral, make it belong to everyone and no one, and have it policed by a neutral force that's not related to any of them. That's just me shooting ideas out. I may be wrong. I don't know.
Have to see the distressing images that we have seen in Jerusalem, in other parts of Israel, and that we no longer have to hear about fatalities.
Julie
Thank
Elliott.
you, Mr. Speaker. As others have said, I condemn the violence wherever it comes from and feel very strongly that those responsible for that violence should be held to account. The Minister has spoke about...
So we've got 13 questions left after this.
There have been 4 wars in Gaza since 2000 and no one has been held to account.
I thought it was 3 wars
side.
or 2.
So bringing an end to the current hysteria...
although you could argue this has been in a constant state of war for 25 years. So there's that.
The demolition orders in Sheikh Jarrah are only the tip of the iceberg. The status quo is not really the status quo. There is a third of Palestinian homes probably under threat, according to the UN, of demolition orders in the Jerusalem area. These issues need addressing before we could move to a two-state solution. Does the Minister agree with me that those engaged in violence from any side should know there will be a day of reckoning and consequences for their actions? And what will the British government do, in line with the international community, to ensure this happens?
Fair question.
The Honourable Lady is right that we should focus on bringing about a speedy resolution to the conflict. As I have said, the rocket attacks from Gaza are unacceptable. They are unjustified.
Neither are Israel blowing buildings up.
Israel does have a right to defend itself, And we have made clear that in doing so, they must.
How can one side have a right to defend himself but not the other? That is ridiculous.
Casualties. Ultimately, the two-state solution is, in our assessment, the best way of bringing about lasting peace for the people of the region, and that will continue to be a priority area for UK foreign policy in the region.
So, let's unpack that answer there, because it was just full of hypocrisy. So, Israel are allowed to defend themselves, but not Palestine. And then, again, he says the answer is a two-state solution, but he's already said that we won't be looking at recognising Palestine as a state. So you can't have a two-state solution but only one state. This is the fallacy of these politicians, and this is where the nonsense of their answers comes in, because unless they want... If they really want a two-state solution and they really want peace, they need to recognise Palestine. It is as simple as that.
Jack Miller. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's deeply upsetting that we are again witnessing such violence and division, especially when the Abraham Accords signed between Israel and Gulf partners last year showed that peace is achievable. So
Israel and Gulf partners, that's not Palestine and Gaza.
His Israeli and Gulf counterparts on how the current tensions can be de-escalated.
I thank my honourable friend for the question. As I say, the Foreign Secretary has spoken with his Israeli counterpart and will very shortly be speaking with the Palestinian Prime Minister, amongst other calls that ministers and senior officials have been making.
That's a nonsense question, that.
We will use our significant...
By the looks of it, all the good questions are coming at the end of this. So
a passionate...
We've got Paula Barker next, and then we've got James... Is that James? Jeremy Hunt or James Hunt? Is there a James Hunt?
Let's go to Paula Barker. Paula.
Jane Hunt, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The human misery on display in East Jerusalem.
So because she's from Liverpool, he's just going to tell her she's wrong off the bat. Watch this.
International community to bear witness to as the violence escalates. I join with honourable members on both sides of the House in condemning the violence on both sides. Sometimes the most difficult conversations are required with our allies. So what is the position of the British government on forced evictions and displacement of Palestinian families in East Jerusalem? And has the position been relayed to the Israeli government?
So maybe won't
and does the minister believe that Mr. Netanyahu's government is sincerely committed to a viable two-state solution, given the plan previously cooked up with President Biden's predecessor? Thank you.
Exactly. Good question.
Mr. Speaker, the UK government's position on settlements and evictions is long-standing, and as I say, has been communicated a number of times, both today at the dispatch box and at previous occasions in the dispatch box. We do of course outline directly to the Israeli government our position on such matters, and also from the dispatch box. And we will work with the government of Israel and the Palestinian Authority and their regional friends and neighbours to work towards a sustainable two-state solution, which remains...
Again, two-state solution, but there's only one state in this. Recognise Palestine.
Let's go to Jane Hunt. Jane.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Many of my constituents have contacted me about the recent reports from Jerusalem, and I share their concerns about the ongoing violence and unrest. I therefore welcome the government's strong call.
It looks like one side of her hair's been done by one of those dog groomers. Sorry.
Agree that this violence is completely unacceptable, and that all
it's a will you agree with me question.
To de-escalate tensions and achieve a peaceful resolution.
Waste of a question, that.
The honourable lady makes a very good point. That
like literally, that is a sort of like any user on Twitter who thinks this is a topic would have asked that pointless question. Pointless, absolutely pointless.
So we can see an end.
Hang your head in shame, Jane. That was a crap question. As you can see, I don't swear now on this. I don't swear. Gavin Newlands.
Mr. Speaker, the government's response to this and every other episode in Palestine is and are completely inadequate.
Yes.
The Palestinians have lived under brutalistic oppression and apartheid by Israel with the tacit consent of the West for too long. We've heard the plague on both.
It's the first time we've heard the word apartheid today, by the way.
Of course, we must condemn.
It should have been used in every question.
So in that spirit, can the Minister tell me whether he thinks it appropriate that the UK grant arms licences that sees UK weapons used in these indiscriminate Israeli attacks?
Very good question. Very good question.
Mr. Speaker, the government takes its arms export responsibilities very
No,
seriously.
you don't.
And
What?
we aim to operate...
They take arms deals. Do they hell? They sell. This is the government that sells missiles to the Saudi Arabians so they can bomb Yemen. They can not just bomb Yemen, but indiscriminately bomb Yemen. The UK government doesn't give a crap who it sells weapons to. They never have, and they never will. That is total crap.
One of the most robust arms export licences in
Come
the world.
on.
Consider all our
Come on.
applications against a strict risk assessment framework to keep all licences under careful continual review as a
The thing what he doesn't say is that the strict, like the risk thing they're looking for is, will that country use these weapons against the UK? Yes or no? No. Ah, cool, we can sell them the weapons then. Where's our millions and millions of dollars? Give me the dollars.
Standard.
Hypocritical bastards.
Andrew
over there.
Salou. Andrew.
Andrew.
Thank you, Mr.
Andrew
Speaker.
Dusalou.
And while there is never any excuse for firing rockets on civilians, wouldn't Israelis sleep more soundly at night if access to all the holy sites was maintained as agreed in 1967? Free
67.
Palestinian elections were allowed
What?
in East Jerusalem, and Palestinians were not being evicted
50
from their
years
homes
ago.
in Jerusalem.
So wait, I didn't know that. There was an agreement on religious freedom in Jerusalem made 50 years ago and it's just ignored. 50 years ago. It just shows you how long this nonsense has been going on.
Mr. Speaker, as I've said, the UK's position.
This makes me so angry. This
is well known. It is incredibly important that worshippers have access to these very holy sites in Jerusalem. We have been supportive of Palestinian Authority elections, and we push for them to go ahead, including in East Jerusalem.
Let's go to Janet Davey. Janet.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What we're seeing in the news is absolutely horrific. Many constituents have contacted me in the last few days about the violence against worshippers
don't like a white
during
background.
Ramadan, as well as the
Get rid of that.
evictions in Sheikh Jarrah. Airstrikes on both sides must absolutely end, and I condemn this
Why is she
violence.
smiling while she's
As
saying
the
that?
occupying
Like,
power, the Israeli government has
airstrikes
legal
should absolutely
obligations
end.
that it is not
It's like,
meeting.
this is
What
not a
is the
smile
UK
when you're
government
talking
doing to ensure
instance.
Israel adheres to international law?
I don't think so.
The Honourable Lady is right that violence against peaceful
Earlier
worshippers
questions, right, though.
of any faith is unacceptable. We condemn, as I've said, the rocket attacks from Gaza, and we will continue to be a voice for calm and region. A voice for calm and peace in this region, and we'll work with international partners, and that does include at times having difficult conversations with some of our friends in the region, but we are unafraid.
I'd love
of
to see
doing
the
so where
evidence of these
necessary.
difficult conversations, you know?
Speaker,
Stephen
the
Crabb.
violence and the loss of life is tragic and it does need to stop.
But
isn't it the case that right under the
Told you.
noses of the international community, Hamas has been allowed to build a terrorist city-state in Gaza?
What?
They diverted humanitarian resources into stockpiling missiles behind civilian
What a
buildings.
scumbag.
Does
What
my
a
right honourable friend
scumbag.
agree with me that it's wrong to draw some kind of phony equivalence between the actions and the aggression of terrorists and the sovereign
It's just
right
interesting. I wonder if he's
of,
been on the. If
legitimate
he's had the
democratic
Israel
government
holiday
to defend its
that many
citizens. I
politicians
wouldn't
get.
expect the Minister at the Dispatch Box or anybody else in our government to do anything other than what the Israeli government is doing to defend its citizens.
Pardon what?
My right honourable friend makes an important point that the military wing of Hamas is a prescribed terrorist organisation, and we have a
Boo.
policy of no contact.
It's only
with
a
Hamas.
prescribed terrorist
It's,
organisation
it's
because the
priority.
Israelis don't like them. The Israelis don't like people
The rocket
fighting for their
attacks,
freedom.
from Gaza.
Nonsense. They're not
into,
terrorists.
Israel, and they are the actions of a terrorist
This is the thing, so
organisation.
one
As I said,
person's
Israel has
terrorist,
the right
another person's
to
freedom
defend
fighter.
itself.
This is all that's
But we
happening
have
here.
said, and I've
Now,
said
the guy earlier on that mentioned his register of interest thing, that actually got me going. Let's have a quick look at this a second. Now, where are we? Here we go. Stephen Crab, register of interest. Sorry about my typing. I am dyslexic as hell. Stephen Crab, not Carb. Sorry, I'm just doing some very quick searching here. They work for you, Wales. Let's have a look. So, place your bets now. Will Conservative Friends at Israel be on Stephen Crab's register of interests? Let's have a look. Wait, what? Stephen Crab, where's your register of interests, mate? Here we go. Oh, look who's at the top of the list. Look who's at the top of the list. I don't think you can see that on here, annoyingly. Top of the list. April, you can't see the date there. It's April 12th, 2021. Let's view the full entry. Conservative Friends of Israel. Can you, Adam and Eve it? Who would have thought it that Stephen Crab has had the Israel holiday? He's been to Israel. Look, we see down here, he's had a air travel, accommodation, hospitality, up to a £2,400 holiday to Israel and the West Bank. He went on the 16th of February to the 21st of February 2020. And this is why he's talking about Israel as if they're the absolute good guys and Palestine as if they're terrorists and bad guys. It wouldn't surprise me if we looked at James Cleverley's register of interest. We would find the same sort of information there. And this is why he takes what Stephen's doing, he owns it, and he uses it as the main narrative, that they're terrorists and they're fighting back.
This at the dispatch box and directly to
like I said earlier, this is how political
government.
propaganda works. It's about manufacturing consent, and they manufacture consent by manufacturing reality around us. Manufacturing a state of hyper-reality that they want us to live within.
Speaker, the extensive expansion of illegal settlements in East Jerusalem, forced eviction of Palestinian families from their homes in Sheikh Jarrah, brutality against worshippers in the third most holy site in Islam and during a Ramadan. This isn't about a clash between two equal sides. Until we discuss the root issue, we miss the entire context, but fails to recognise that one
Hello
side
everyone's
is
watching today, by the way. I've not got the chat or anything open, so I've got no idea if there's chat or people watching. If you are, just please subscribe.
That the Israeli ends all the discriminatory and illegal practices that have actually provoked these current tensions. And what specifically will it do to ensure for accountability and for violations of international law,
we should be
has been going on
sanctioning
for the
them.
last 50 years?
Like, what we should do, and we should be sanctioning Israel. That's what makes the most sense.
The UK's position on settlements and evictions is clear. I have spoken about it from this dispatch.
It's clear that they do nothing about it. It's clear that they don't care.
The Israeli government. However, I would make the point, there is no legitimacy, there is no justification for the indiscriminate rocket attacks from Gaza into Israel.
There's no defence for Israel blowing up blocks of flats.
The community in Aylesbury are extremely distressed by recent events in East Jerusalem,
Did Rob
describing
Butler.
this as a moment of deep anguish and sorrow. They want to see an immediate end to the eviction of Palestinians from their homes, as well as immediate and concrete progress towards a two-state solution. So does my right honourable friend agree that that is in fact the only way to deliver Palestinian
It probably
self-determination,
is.
to
That's the thing.
permanently end the Arab-Israeli conflict and preserve Israel's Jewish and democratic identity, and that therefore his department remains committed to achieving that solution based on 1967 borders with agreed land swaps?
Mr. Speaker, I think members in every part of this House and our constituents
He's got no answer
will
for
have been
this.
deeply distressed by the images that
No
we
answer.
have seen in some of the
He's
most
just
holy
waffling.
sites, as you say, not only in Islam but in Christianity and Judaism. It is in everybody's interest to de-escalate, to bring this current period of violence
so
to a
bright today.
conclusion, and then, as he says, work towards what has been a long-standing UK government position of a peaceful two-state
A long-standing solution that they've done nothing to achieve.
27 withdrawn, so we're going to go to Steve Baker.
Oh,
Steve.
Straight to Steve Baker.
Mr.
Oh,
Speaker, given
Brexit
how
hard
hard
man.
and fast this conflict escalated, and as we approach Eid, can I ask what will the government do specifically to encourage Israel to guarantee freedom of worship for Muslims at the Al-Aqsa.
Great question by Baker here. Baker, right? I just want to say this very quickly on Steve Baker, right? During the whole Brexit thing, people got this really bad image of him. He made himself look like a bit of a tit. You know, he was doing that whole "I'm the Brexit hard man," blah, blah, blah. And it was all a bit wonky, you know? But every so often, he asks a question and he sounds like he's more on the left than the right. This one being a classic example. He just straight up says, he's like, why are we not protecting the rights of Muslims in Palestine? Like, what the hell? Great, perfect. He didn't ramble it, he didn't waffle, he just said it straight up. Like, why? What's it happening?
My honourable friend makes...
Get that right cleverly.
My honourable friend makes an incredibly important point
he did.
about the importance during this holy month of Ramadan.
It's a very easy point as well. A very
access
clear,
to one of the
easy
most holy
point.
sites in Islam. And that's something we have communicated with the Israeli government.
Even
We'll
he's like, this is
continue
waffle.
To work towards a de-escalation, particularly at this most sensible and religious time. And that is a conversation that we have had recently, and we will continue to have
recently. I wonder how recently.
And senior official level.
No answer. And lastly, it's Ian Paisley. Oh no, he's not last.
I stood in Malfalson in the southern district of Israel, just on the edge of the Gaza Strip, and held in my hands the remains of a Hamas-engineered rocket fired into a playground of school children.
So of course we've got to remember, this is Ian Paisley. He's famously on the pro-union side, so it doesn't surprise us that he is again on the side of the aggressors.
In the Holy Land, no right-thinking person could not be heartbroken by what they see on our television screen.
It's good to hear some good old-fashioned Northern Ireland Troubles rhetoric and propaganda being used in the Israel-Palestine situation, eh?
Because they want to murder Israelis, and they want to obliterate the state of Israel off.
I guaranteed you this is just one of his speeches from the 80s, 70s, 80s, repurposed. Scratches out.
That the Palestinian people
scratches out Republicans and just puts in Israelis.
That wishes to continue to rocket launch attacks into Israel. And I would urge them
what a ridiculous question this was.
To persuade the Palestinian people to free themselves from the grip of Hamas.
So, like Ian, I was talking directly to you, Ian, here. If you want that to happen, you need to give them their rights. You need to give them their state rights so we can treat them like people and we can give them rights. Bizarre. I actually expected something better from Ian Paisley. I thought that a politician who was connected to the Troubles, who saw war from the inside out, who saw the bad stuff at war, I thought he might come in here and he might have a question and try and de-escalate stuff. But no, he just went on a propaganda trip calling the Palestinians terrorists. Just insane.
Mr. Speaker,
absolutely
the
insane.
Rocket attacks by Hamas, which, as I say, whose military wing is a prescribed terrorist organisation by the UK government, is completely
by the UK government,
counterproductive to the effort for peace, does harm to the Palestinian people.
This is ridiculous. Like, what he's saying there is absolutely... He's arguing that Hamas aren't needed. That means that the Palestinians should not be allowed to defend themselves. But earlier on, he told us that Israel should categorically be allowed to defend itself. How is that right? How is that fair?
Completely against the interests.
It's just, it's not fair. It's not even logical. It's just nonsense. Here's the last question.
Speaker, I'm deeply concerned
Imran
by
Khan.
the escalating tension between Israel and Palestine. And we all here condemn the violence against civilians on both sides, whether that be the murderous missile attacks or what I consider the misguided attempted eviction of Palestinian residents in Sheikh Jarrah. Mr. Speaker, given that the missile technology employed attacking Israeli heartlands could only have come from Iran, does my right honourable friend agree with me that now is
this is actually an interesting point
that rewards it for instigating further instability in the region as well as violating its JCPOA.
Okay, so we'll listen to this answer, then I'm going to speak about this. Because this guy actually...
Is not another reminder where one needed that we must not appease this dangerous regime.
So this guy's asking a question that I was actually talking to someone about yesterday.
I'm not able to speak on the point that he's made about the relationship between Iran, or the potential relationship between Iran.
No, I actually
at this point
predicted this might happen yesterday. So
we are working to de-escalate the situation.
Right, so we know what he's going to say. He's working to de-escalate. We've heard this a million times. So what Imran Khan just asked there, though, but I'm just going to address this point before I wrap the stream up. Yesterday, Hamas and the Palestinian army, I forget what they're called, they made it very public that the rockets that were used yesterday were a new sort of rocket. They're bigger rockets than you've used before. They've got, like, the old rockets could only go, I think it was 10 kilometers or something like that. These ones can apparently travel 100 kilometers. They're much bigger. They're not the standard there's another question. Where did he come from? They're not the standard anti-tank weapons that they were used to use, because it was like anti-tank weapons that used to get fired in Israel. Now they're like proper rockets that can actually go quite a long way. Now, this raised the question in my head. I was like, right, and I was sure that governments are going to ask this question as well, because it's the only logical way this question can go. It is, how are the people in, like, how are Hamas managing to make new rockets? Like, they all live in land which is like basically an open prison. The borders are closed. How are they managing to build factories and manufacture hundreds of these rockets? This is a question. This is where I think the question's going to go, because it doesn't make sense that all these new, I'm not talking about something they've just bought new from another country, but newly developed rockets, like, they have to be coming from somewhere. They don't have, I find it very hard to believe they've got arms manufacturing facilities in Gaza or Palestine, because if they did, the Israelis would bomb it out. They would flatten it. It would be gone in days. And this leads to the question of, where are these rockets coming from? And when I ask this because I think this is where governments are going to go next, because it's all very well for Israel or what to want to stop the rockets landing, but they're eventually going to start asking the question of, like, where are these rockets coming from? And when you think about it geopolitically, like that, Imran Khan there just said that straight up. He said he thinks they're coming from Iran. Now, it would make sense that they would blame Iran, because that's their bogeyman at the moment. That's who America and UK would love to go to war with. It would stop the UK having to pay them back the $400 million for the tanks, and it would have let America get rid of Iran, because they've wanted to do that for decades. But it maybe isn't Iran. Like, if you look at the geopolitical stage, who could be supplying these rockets? It could be Russia. It could be Iran. It could be Turkey. Heck, it could even be Saudis. We don't know where they're coming from. But I think this is going to be where the question moves to, because geopolitically, they're going to want to know who is supplying Palestine with the rockets, because they're never going to give Palestine the right to have the rockets and defend themselves. So they're clearly going to follow the paper trail, and they're going to find who is supplying the rockets, and they're going to no doubt try and make them the bad guy. Now, what that Tory Minister Khan just said there, that's where I pretty much think they're going to go. I think they're going to blame Iran. I don't think they're going to blame Turkey, because they're an ally, basically. They're not a really, really good, strong ally, but they are an ally with Britain and the UK. I don't think they'll blame Russia, because, quite frankly, Russia is the most belligerent country in the world, and every other country are scared of them for some reason, because they're just scared. They can't deal with belligerents. And that only leaves Iran. That means that they would blame Iran for it, and I think they will probably do that, and who knows where this could lead. Probably nowhere fast, but it is what it is. So let's hear. I did not realise there was another question being asked here, but let's quickly listen to it, then wrap the stream up.
Brought this complex situation onto our streets, our university campuses, and online. So what does my right honourable friend say to those who seek to cause divisions between communities here in the UK, and will he join me in thanking the CST for all the work they're doing to keep the Jewish community safe?
Mr.
So it was about communities fighting each other. That question had nothing to do with the conflict that has been developing over the last few days. So I think, you know what? I think we'll just leave it there. This has been the government's urgent question on the developing Israel-Palestine situation. If you want to hear my views on what is happening, check the YouTube channel. I released a video last night. It's only 3 minutes long. It's not got any facts. Well, it's got some light facts in it, but it's my opinion, my heartfelt opinion on this situation with Palestine. Yeah, remember and hit subscribe. I did think this was going to be Prime Minister's questions today, but it wasn't. We've got something totally different. Thankfully, it was something that was totally needed. If you check out, keep an eye on Twitter at Broke Britannia. I will post any updates there when I'm going next. Probably be next and live in the next few days, but who knows? It's only Wednesday. Things change fast in the current climate.